What if the scariest stories weren't told by the victims, but by the people who created them? Tonight, we're doing something different on Unforgotten Cases. Three individuals, people who made serious, harmful choices in their lives, submitted their stories anonymously. Not to seek sympathy, not to be forgiven, but because what happened to them during their worst moments was something they could never explain. And honestly, neither can we. These are confessions. These are warnings. And somewhere buried inside each one is a mystery that was never solved. Stay with me, because every single one of these takes a turn you will not see coming. This first account comes from someone who spent roughly 6 months making decisions they deeply regret. They've asked to remain anonymous, and honestly, after hearing what happened to them, you might understand why. He was drifting, moving from small town to small town across rural America, never staying long, never leaving a trail. He had a routine, a strategy, really, that he used to take advantage of vulnerable people. Elderly couples, living alone in isolated homes, far from neighbors, far from help. His method was simple and cruel. He'd wait until around 9 in the evening, late enough for darkness, early enough that people were still awake, and then he'd knock on the door in a panic. Broken down car, pregnant wife, first baby. Please, can I use your phone? It worked. Every time. He was careful about who he chose. Not just physically fragile, but, as he describes it, people who seemed like they wouldn't fight back. He never intended to hurt anyone physically. He just wanted what he could take and then disappear before anyone could stop him. For months, it worked exactly the way he planned. Until one night in a house, sitting completely alone on a road in the middle of nowhere. He'd done his scouting. One old pickup truck on the side. Nothing but woods behind the property. No neighbors for several minutes in any direction. It seemed perfect. He knocked. He screamed for help. He played the part. The door opened. An elderly woman stood there. But she didn't react the way his targets usually did. No panic. No urgency. No sympathetic rush to help. She just looked at him, calm, almost amused, and asked what the problem was. He launched into his story. Pregnant wife. Hospital. Please. She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. She grabbed his shoulder and told him to come inside. Something already felt wrong. She guided him to the living room just inside the front door. Her voice was oddly cheerful, almost sing-song. Don't worry. You'll be okay. And then he heard footsteps. A man walked into the room. Young, mid-20s, maybe 30. Not what he expected at all. Well over 6 feet tall, broad, with a thick, dark beard. The elderly woman explained this was her son. He was carrying a hunting rifle. Before anything else could happen, the woman called out loudly for her husband. A man named Hank limped into the room and simply stared. Said nothing. Just watched. The son announced he'd go outside and take a look at the car. That was the moment the visitor understood the trap was closing. Because her son walking out to the car meant he would immediately see that the car was running just fine, and Hank was blocking the exit. It was also at that moment, in the frozen silence of that living room, that he noticed the smell. He'd been so focused on getting inside, getting positioned, staying in character, that he hadn't noticed it before. But now it hit him. It wasn't anything simple. Not old food. Not animals. It was something else, deeper, heavier, something that made his instincts scream. He started moving toward the door. Hank moved with him. The woman moved with him. She kept asking, cheerfully, where he was going. What's wrong? Don't you still want our help? He made up a clumsy excuse about needing something from the car, and the moment he got within reach of the front door, he ran. Hank's hand grazed his back. He slipped free. He burst outside and found all 4 of his tires slashed flat. He could hear Hank yelling from inside the house that he was outside. He ran into the woods. He pressed himself behind a large tree in the darkness and dropped to the ground, hard hammering, trying not to breathe. And then came the footsteps. Heavy, steady, getting closer. He didn't move, couldn't move. The footsteps grew louder and louder, and then, passing within 2 feet of his head, the son walked by, rifle swinging casually in his hand, scanning the dark trees. He didn't see him. By some miracle, he didn't see him. He waited until the footsteps faded. Then he crawled back through the woods to the road. He could see the old woman through the window, standing completely still, staring out toward the trees. She didn't see him either. He got in his car, drove on 4 flat tires until the rims ground into the asphalt. Then he abandoned it and ran back to town. He never told police. He didn't want anyone asking questions about him. He doesn't know for certain what was waiting for him in that house. He only knows the smell, the slashed tires, the silent husband, and the son with the rifle, and he knows it all added up to something that would have ended him. He cleaned up his life after that night. Not completely, but enough. And he believes, whatever those people had planned for him, it was far worse than anything he had ever done. The second story is different in nature, but no less unsettling. This person describes themselves as a loner. Quiet, awkward, never really connected with people. They kept to themselves through school, through college, through life. Then a class project paired them with a girl. She was friendly, easy to talk to, the kind of person who made an uncomfortable situation feel manageable. He found himself noticing small things about her, the way she spoke, the way she moved. He told himself it was harmless. He was wrong. After they exchanged numbers for the project, he looked her up, found her on social media, and then kept going, scrolling through photos, tracking her location patterns from posts, piecing together the neighborhood where she lived, mapping her routine. Within days, he had her address. He drove past the house once, then came back and slowed down, noticed a light upstairs and wondered which room was hers. He recognized her car from the college parking sticker on the window. He told himself he wasn't crossing a line. This became a habit. A few nights a week, parked down the street, watching. One night, he saw the blinds shift in the upstairs window. Someone was looking out. He drove away immediately and spent the entire drive home in a cold sweat. The next day in class, she mentioned casually that some of the guys at school were strange, that she felt like she was dealing with a stalker situation. He said nothing. He was terrified she meant him. He stopped going near her house after that, scaled back his online surveillance. But then, alone at night in his grandmother's old house, something changed. He heard tapping at the window. Not a knock, not a branch. A slow, deliberate sound, like someone running their hand along the glass, checking if they could see inside. The next night, the same sound came from a different side of the house. Then he started seeing shapes through the blinds. Silhouettes. The outline of a figure standing just outside the glass. Then multiple figures, moving around the perimeter of the house. He stopped opening the blinds. He stopped going to class. He locked himself in his room with the lights off and ordered everything he needed delivered so he could avoid going outside. For days, this continued. He sent a message to the girl, asking her to please stop sending people to his house. The moment he sent it, he regretted it. Her response came slowly. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared, disappeared, as if she was trying to figure out how to respond. When she did, she was confused. She had no idea what he was talking about, and something about that response made him believe her. If it wasn't her, then who was it? That night, the doorbell rang. He crept downstairs in the dark and stood near the door without opening it. The person on the other side heard him. They told him to open the door. Not asked, told. When he didn't respond, the tone shifted. The voice on the other side became sharp, insistent, demanding he open the door immediately. He backed away and returned to his room. The doorbell rang continuously for over a minute. Then silence. He stayed with family for several days. When he came back, the activity had stopped. He never found out who it was. He says the experience made him understand, in a way that nothing else could, exactly what it felt like to be the one being watched. He never repeated his behavior again. This next confession comes from someone who, for a long stretch of their life, would describe themselves as completely ordinary. No record, no history of trouble. Just a quiet person who took a nighttime security job at a large strip mall in their hometown and slowly let boredom lead them somewhere they never should have gone. The job itself was simple. Monitor cameras. Walk the property a few times each night. Keep things secure. For a self-described night owl who preferred solitude, it felt almost ideal. But ideal got old fast. After a few months of watching the same empty hallways and listening to the same podcasts, something shifted. Not dramatically, just a quiet restlessness. A need for something more stimulating than silence. That's when he started paying closer attention to the cameras. Not to do his job better, but to find the gaps. Every security system has blind spots. Areas the cameras simply don't reach. He started mapping them, doing test runs during his nightly walks, performing some movement in a spot he suspected was unmonitored, then returning to the office to check the footage. If nothing appeared on the recording, he noted the location. Once he had a complete mental map of every blind spot in the building, he started using them. It began small. A shirt here, a hat there. Items taken from dead zones in the camera coverage, slipped out through a back door that also happened to sit outside the camera grid. He'd retrieve them the following morning on his way out. Over time, it escalated. More valuable items, more calculated timing. He convinced himself he had perfected it. For months, the only unusual activity on his watch was the activity he was creating. Then one night, during his rounds, he heard something. Laughter. Children's laughter. Light, high-pitched, echoing through the empty store around him. He stopped walking and swept his flashlight across the aisles. Nothing. The laughter continued, seemingly coming from multiple directions at once. And beneath it, something else, whispering. Low and constant, the words just out of reach, like a conversation happening just beyond the edge of his hearing. He shouted for whoever was there to come out. The laughter paused for a moment, then started again. He moved through the store methodically, checking every aisle, every corner. Nothing. No one. Just the sound following him from all sides. He threatened to call the police. The laughter briefly stopped and then resumed, as if amused by the empty threat. He ran back to the security office and pulled up the camera feeds. The footage showed him walking through the store, waving his flashlight, shouting at empty air. Nothing else. No children. No movement. Just him. He told himself it was his imagination, the sleep deprivation, the isolation, the boredom messing with his mind. He had 2 nights off. He pushed it aside. When he returned to work, he asked the guard he was replacing whether anything unusual had happened in his absence. Nothing, apparently. That night, around 3 in the morning, he made his way back to the same store. He reached for a pair of sneakers on the shelf. Something swept past him in the aisle. He froze. The laughter came back. Immediate. Surrounding him. But this time it felt closer, more present, like it was inside the room with him rather than coming through walls. He ran out of the aisle, still clutching the sneakers, and started moving through the store with his flashlight sweeping everywhere. Then, at the far end of an aisle, something moved. A small, dark shape stepped out from the shadows and waved at him. He shouted at it to stay where it was and ran toward it. He took his eyes off it for 1 second. It was gone. He circled the area frantically, calling out, demanding it show itself. The laughter and the sound of small running footsteps continued all around him, but every direction he turned was empty. And then, from somewhere close, clear as a voice standing right beside him, something said his full name. His full name. Not a nickname. Not a partial. His complete name, spoken out loud in an empty store at 3 in the morning. He didn't stop moving until he was back in the security office with the door closed. He watched the footage from every camera angle covering the aisle where he saw the figure. The figure wasn't there. The camera was pointed directly at that spot. There was nothing in the frame except the empty aisle. He reported everything to his supervisor the next morning. She watched the footage. She saw only him running through the store erratically and noticed the sneakers sitting on his desk. The stores had been reporting missing inventory. He didn't have a good explanation for the sneakers. He quit on the spot. An investigation followed, focused on the missing merchandise, not on the intruders he'd reported. Somehow, nothing was ever formally traced back to him. He still doesn't have a rational explanation for what he heard that night. He has no history of hallucinations. Nothing like it has happened before or since. But something in that store knew his name, and whatever it was, it never appeared on a single frame of footage. The last story starts as something puzzling, and slowly becomes something deeply disturbing. 2 years before submitting this account, this person was completely adrift. No meaningful direction, no real connections. He tried filling that emptiness with different things, and nothing worked. Then one afternoon, on a walk through his neighborhood, he noticed a door. A house he knew. Owners away at work. A construction crew that had just left for lunch. He tried the door. It was unlocked. He went inside. He describes what he felt in those few minutes as the most intense rush of his life. Being somewhere he wasn't supposed to be, moving through someone else's space in silence, completely invisible. He stayed for several minutes, then left before anyone returned. He was back the following week. And the week after that, he started studying people's schedules, watching from a distance, learning when homes would be empty, identifying entry points. Spare keys under doormats. Unlocked side windows. Back doors that didn't latch properly. He never stole anything. But he started leaving things. A folded blanket on a couch that wasn't there before. Items placed carefully in spots where they'd be found, but only after the owner came home. He would sit outside afterward and imagine the confusion. The conversations. The arguments. One time, he left items in a bathroom that suggested to a husband that his wife had been entertaining company. He waited in the bushes and watched the confrontation that followed when the couple arrived home. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He kept doing it anyway. Then one afternoon, he came home from work and found something on his kitchen counter. A small glass vase. One yellow flower. He'd never seen either of them before in his life. Next to the vase was a handwritten note in careful cursive. "We know it was you." He checked every lock, every window. Nothing had been forced. Nothing was broken. It was as if whoever left this had simply walked in. He locked himself in his room that night. Calling the police wasn't an option. If whoever left this note actually knew what he'd been doing, involving authorities would destroy him. The next morning brought nothing new. He thought maybe it was over. It wasn't. When he came home that evening, there was another note on the counter, next to a dead bird. "We're coming for you." He started packing a bag immediately. He needed to leave. And then, from the floor vent in his bedroom, he heard something. Movement. From the basement. He pressed his ear to the vent. Voices, muffled and low, drifting up through the ductwork. He grabbed his bag and crept toward the front door. His hand was on the basement door handle. Against every rational instinct, he opened it. From below, quiet voices. Still talking. He called down the stairs. "Shuh." That was the only response. A sharp, deliberate hush from somewhere in the dark below. He slammed the basement door and left the house. He drove straight to his family and didn't come back for over a week. When he finally returned to collect his belongings, the front door was wide open. On the counter, another dead bird, more flowers, and a small toy car, a perfect match for the one sitting in his driveway. He checked the basement, and he grabbed what he needed and left. As he reversed out of the driveway, he saw them, an older couple standing directly across the street, watching him. The woman raised her hand and waved. In her fingers was a small yellow flower, identical to the one left in his kitchen. The man beside her didn't move, didn't wave, just watched. He drove away without stopping. He never saw them again. He still doesn't know who they were. He'd never seen them before. He couldn't connect them to any of the homes he'd entered. He moved out at the end of the month, and the reverse thievery ended the same day that first flower appeared on his counter. 3 people, 3 confessions, 3 encounters they cannot explain. What's strange about all of them is the pattern, the feeling of being watched, being anticipated, being known by something or someone that never fully showed itself. Maybe these were consequences. Maybe they were warnings. Maybe something out there in the dark takes notice when people cross certain lines. We don't have the answers. We just have the stories. If these accounts affected you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have your own story, one that's been sitting with you, unexplained, you know where to find us. Unforgotten Cases. We keep listening.